Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending our board meeting tonight. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and please join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On behalf of the board, I welcome all members of the audience to this evening's meeting. This meeting is a working session of the board to conduct the business of the district. The agenda for today's meeting has been published, and the agenda items to be discussed and or voted on have been studied by the board members. I would like to introduce the people participating in this meeting. Recording Secretary Siobhan Frazier, Superintendent Dr. Michelle Reed, board members Amy Cast, David Kogan, Sandy Hayes, and Jacqueline McGordy. I am Bob Swain, and I currently serve as president of the board. An agenda for this evening is available online at boarddocs.com. Would the board like to make any changes to the agenda as it has been published? All right. Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for the vote. All right, motion's been approved 5-0. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the superintendent's report. Dr. Reed.
Thank you, President Swain. And it's been a busy couple weeks. I will say today was a lot of fun greeting our youngest learners. It was our first day of Bridge Week, and I had an opportunity to be at Woodmore Elementary and Canyon Creek and Fernwood this morning. And we had a lot of our young learners there and a lot of staff providing supports. And it's good to see our transportation folks out as well and buses running around the district. So as we gradually gear back up to the classroom, it's nice to try all of our procedures and protocols and make sure we're good to go as we bring more and more students back. I'm looking forward to April 5th, where we'll have all of our kindergarten through 5th graders back in a hybrid. So anyhow, it was an exciting day and grateful that the weather was actually really nice. And we had a chance to be outdoors. And I think it was a great first day of our Bridge Week. Want to remind folks that on March 9th, we had a board SIP visit to Fernwood Elementary School. Really nice job done by Principal Bradshaw and Assistant Principal Redshaw. And we've done continued to do a number of mid-year school plan check-ins with principals. We've had our State of the Schools event, and thank you very much to Lisa Youngblood Hall, President Swain, NSCA President Tim Bertel, and all of our talented student performers as well. It was just a fabulous event. We've continued to do brunch club visits. I was at Crystal Springs most recently and Fernwood, having an opportunity to meet with parents and students. And it's been a really busy bargaining couple weeks as well. We were working on our secondary schedule, and more to come as we have that planning conversation later in the meeting. But we worked through Saturday, actually, put in a full day on Saturday as well. And I think, and yeah, I'll have more to say about that later in the meeting, but it's been a really busy couple weeks, and as we look forward to the next few weeks, I'm just looking forward to welcoming more students and staff back to campuses. Thank you, President Swain.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to association and public comment. The North Shore School Board District Board of Directors has set aside a period of up to 60 minutes to receive updates and comments from association leaders and citizens from our community. The board expects all parties addressing the board to present their comments in a way that is civil and respectful. Please speak directly to the board and address matters related to district operations, policies, procedures, and agenda items under consideration by the board. Comment should not make any reference to an employee, any employee or representative of the district by name or by identifiable reference. There is a complaint process available through the office of the superintendent if interested. Washington state law requires that only items on a previously published agenda be discussed at a board meeting. Any new topics brought up during public comment will either receive a later response from a district employee or board member or be discussed at a future board meeting. That being said, I just want to remind the audience, or just an explanation, board comments, public board comments, or vocalized board comments are another way for the public to provide comments and commentary to the board for us to listen. It's no different than submitting comments either by a voicemail or in written email form in a typical year. So it's a little bit of a odd pause. We receive comments from the public when they're read or they're done vocally in person, that we do not engage in commentary or comment about the comment itself, or ask questions of the person or answer questions of the person's comment. So it's not a back and forth time period. It seems very weird and it's awkward, especially with passionate commentary and comments. So please don't take offense. It's just the way this process operates. And we respond in writing later on to after the board meeting later in the week. So that being said, we will go through. We have 11 actually public comments that were submitted prior to the deadline today. So I'll start. We'll each do two. Amy's, Director Cass is going to do the third. So I'm trying to pull up my other screen here. I will begin. So the first comment we have on the list here is from Dominique France, just entitled public comment. Ms. France says, the stated hurdles by this board and the superintendent are all now removed. Yay. As such, we require all grades in person all days now. There is no more excuses that we, the public that you serve, can accept. There's some bullet points here. One, vaccines have been prioritized for all teachers. Social distancing at 3 feet, not 6 feet, is now proven and accepted by the CDC. 93% of NSD parents are willing to drive children to and from school. PPE is supplied. Insurance protection has been accounted for by the state insurance commissioner. All the stated hurdles are now gone. There's absolutely no excuse not to return all students to school on all days this week. The board and the superintendent have an obligation to accelerate and get all children back to all grades, all days immediately. The stalling has persisted far too long. The district is embarrassingly behind as compared to every other district surrounding us. An award has been provided to the superintendent for leadership. It is time to actually lead. This board is responsible for policy and guidelines. Set them appropriately, managed through a crisis. It is incredibly apparent to the public that there is zero intention of doing the right thing for the students in this district. It is highly apparent that stall tactics are being deployed. Beyond being forced by the governor through proclamations, this district refuses categorically to do the right thing. Stop being led by the unions. Do the right thing. Dominique France. Second comment is from Randy Weymouth. Says the topic is open schools full time. I am a first generation college graduate, as well as the first generation that was not raised in poverty. My great grandmother came to the US from Mexico. She was illiterate. My grandmother left school in 4th grade to work to support her family. My mother was the first to graduate from high school. My father spent his childhood without plumbing or electricity. Public schools provided meals, a safe place, and more importantly, education to get out of poverty. Public education was founded to become the great equalizer between the haves and the have-nots. In the 1800s, there were anti-literacy laws because slave owners knew an educated slave was a free slave. NSD has relied on the affluence and education of their students' parents to paint the picture that every student is okay. They are not. As our students watch thousands of their peers in other parts of the state and country deploying plans to be in person, the NSD board and admin continue to plan the bare minimum of what is required of them. What we have witnessed over the last year has been a complete lack of leadership, bravery, and foresight. If this were war, we would undoubtedly die from a surprise attack. You have had a year to know a vaccine was coming, a year to come up with different plans, and yet it seems as though you are surprised that there was a mandate to open schools. NSD focuses on equality and justice. Yet the very foundation of equality comes from education, and the fact that this is not happening is the epitome of hypocrisy. My children will be okay because I had an education, but for the thousands of children that will not be okay, I hope my voice is heard and you open schools full time for them. Regards, Randy Weymouth, parent of 2 NSD elementary students. All right, Director McGurty, I think it's your turn.
Yes, thank you, President Swain. So this next letter is from Jennifer Riley, RN. Topic, not the North Shore I know. I am a mom to a freshman and senior at Woodinville High School. I am also a 1994 graduate of Bothell High School and never considered raising my children outside of the district. Unfortunately, I seriously regret this decision as this North Shore is no longer the North Shore of my youth. There's a bullet list here. The North Shore I know would not need an emergency proclamation to equitably offer an in-person option to all students. The North Shore I know would not be satisfied only meeting the bare minimum requirements for in-person learning set by the governor. The North Shore I know would not allow the voice of a union to carry more weight than that of its students and families. North Shore has long been a source of pride and identity for our community. Dr. Reed's and this school board's tenure will forever be associated with the decline of North Shore and the denial of a generation's educational opportunities. The loss of community confidence and damage to North Shore's reputation will continue to haunt this district for years. If North Shore does not offer a full-time in-person learning option at the start of the 2021 to 2022 school year, my remaining high schooler will be unenrolled from North Shore and will not return, and I will no longer support the district's requests for bonds and levies at the polls. I implore you to represent the community that elected you, follow the science, work with the union, not for the union, and fight for the education of our students. Our kids and our community deserve to know the North Shore of my youth. I trusted you with the education of my children, and you have all let us down. Full-time in-person learning for all students now. Okay, the next letter is from Kristen Marshall, titled Public Comment. The blame for the children who are struggling rests squarely on the shoulders of this school board, Dr. Reed, and whatever powers the WEA/unions seem to have over decisions that are supposed to be in the best interests of the children. There are still no clear plans for elementary schools. There has been no information shared whether or not our children will have the same teachers they have had all year. How can there not be any information about this? What happened to all of the planning that was supposed to have happened this past year? My third grader has an IEP to address social emotional concerns. Change is a major setback for him. His teacher is amazing, and he has finally learned to trust her. However, on Saturday night, March 21st, 21, an email informed me that she had to request remote teaching because she has a high schooler struggling and he also needs her. There are no plans for a middle/high school return, leaving her with no choice and no solution for my child. Please don't placate me and say change is hard for everybody. Clearly, but you don't know my son. You have no clue what the ramifications are for him and our family. As his parent, I know he desperately needs in-person school, but what am I supposed to do? Sending him back to a brand new teacher and class is as detrimental, if not more so, than keeping him home. I am a widowed mother to 4 children in this district, ranging from 3rd to 10th grade. You are not solving any problems here, instead exacerbating them. I have no idea where you are getting your reopening guidance from, but obviously not from people that get it. Open all schools for all children now. Kristen Marshall.
Thank you, Director McGurty. I'll go next. This letter is from Lisa Lefaber. The title is Return All Kids to School Full-Time. Good morning. I understand there is a school board meeting and decision coming up. I wanted to bring to your attention an email exchange from this past summer below. It was the below deception from Reed that has us pull our kids from a district we specifically moved into. Now we have incurred thousands in costs for a private school. It's sad because our kids are one of the lucky ones because we were able to make alternative plans. Also, the hybrid is a huge financial and emotional burden to working families. Go back to 5 days for the last 2.5 months. Also, give parents 100% certainty that there will be a full-time in-person school option this fall. There's a quote from John F. Kennedy that says, leadership and learning are indispensable to each other. Clearly, the past decisions are not working. Learn from them for the sake of the kids. Also, leadership is an action and doing the right thing when it's tough. Leadership is not applying for awards to write a press release that you are a leader. With sincere disappointment, Lisa Lefaber. The next letter is from Amanda Gurley. The title is just public comment, March 22nd, 2021. I would like information on what the district's relationship with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation COVID-19 pilot program for reopening schools is. The district has indicated random testing. I would like to know how this is going to be performed. Additionally, I would like to know the specifics of what information will be shared with the Gates Foundation and any other outside organizations. Additionally, because NSD has failed to commit to full-time in-person instruction for fall, and the WEA has released communication as of last week indicating their continued, in quotes, fight for remote learning, end quote, we are enrolling our children in private school for the 2021-2022 school year. This creates financial strain on our one-income family, but NSD has failed those students who desperately need in-person instruction, including my child who has an IEP, which cannot be met in an online environment and at no fault to the teacher or staff who are trying. My third grader has SPD and is now struggling with anxiety and panic attacks, which are worsening as a result of remote learning. In meeting with our pediatrician and specialist team at Children's, the overwhelming response is to get kids back to full-time in-person learning. The union has made it clear they will continue to stand in the way of this, and it is time for the NSD board and Dr. Reed to stand up and represent our children, families, and our community who are demanding a full-time in-person learning option. Thank you, Amanda Gurley.
So I will read the public comment from Erin McPherson. Subject is public comment March 22nd, 2021. As the parent of a 6th and 9th grader, I would like to express how deeply disappointed I am with how NSD is handling reopening plans. What should be an opportunity to proactively demonstrate commitment to ensuring all students are able to learn in an environment where they are nurtured and supported to succeed at high levels, has been transformed into a circus. Instead of working to remove barriers and publicly communicate the expectation that all NSD students deserve the opportunity to learn in an environment that works for them, this board appears to have chosen to sit back and let outside forces dictate the course. There have only been reactionary changes to the status quo of remote learning in recent months. Prioritization of vaccinations for teachers contribute to the protracted scheme currently in play that returns elementary students to classrooms, and a mandate by the governor will require NSD to offer secondary students access to in-person learning or risk becoming ineligible for state funding. On Friday, the CDC officially updated its guidance on distancing between students from 6 feet to 3 feet in classrooms. This should be good news if NSD was really committed to students. Instead, there was silence from NSD while outside groups announced their intention to advocate against updating state DOH guidance to mirror the CDC's update. What is it going to take for this board to actively advocate for what is in the best interest of students? And that's signed Erin McPherson. Yes, okay. Next one is from Jennifer Greiner. Again, subject public comment, March 22nd, 2021. To whom it may concern, I am the mother of 5th grader at Kenmore Elementary and an 8th grader at Kenmore Middle School. It's time to get our kids back in the classroom. Instead of spending time sharing the drama our family has experienced and continues to experience because my kids are stuck on a computer for remote school, bored out of their mind, I send to email to demonstrate profound support to get our kids back to school. Public health measures work, mask up, wash your hands, let's do this. Bring our kids back to school, full-time and in person, improve communication from the district, schools and districts with specifics and details instead of words that essentially give us no guidance. I pay taxes every year, taxes that are supposed to be providing a publicly funded education because education is a right, not a privilege. Let's do this. Thank you, Jennifer Greiner.
Thank you, Director Hayes. I'm going to read the next public comment from Lizette Bird. The subject is public comment, March 22nd, 2021. Call to action. To NSD Board. I plan to remove my children from the district if NSD does not offer full-time in-person learning in the fall. My daughter has complained that she has learned nothing from this year and it is a waste of time. She has lost her joy for school she once had. She has a wonderful teacher, but that is not enough. She needs to be engaged in person. My children are struggling academically, socially, and emotionally. Neither of them attend classes or pay much attention since they are left to manage themselves while I work full-time. I don't feel that my voice is being heard or any parent that needs their child to have in-person learning 100% of the school day. I demand a return to full in-person learning in the fall. Give parents the option for full in-person learning in the fall for those who want or need it. I have gone through NSD myself and loved it and wanted the same great experience for my own children. However, the pandemic has shown that the board's lack of progress for getting our kids back in person is a last priority, not first. I'm greatly disappointed in how our district lacks motivation to get kids in school, even though the science says it's safe. Other states and districts that neighbor us have proved that it can be done well. Please get our kids back to 100% in person in the fall. Thanks, Lizette Bird. This next public comment is from Peter Otelli. I hope I pronounced that right. Subject, disappointed parent. I am extremely disappointed in the lack of urgency in getting school reopened. I have a 5th grader and a 9th grader and both need to be back in person full time. Remote learning does not work and has not worked. Study after study is confirming this. Common sense confirms this. President Biden, Governor Jay Inslee, Chris Reichtel, Superintendent of Public Instruction for Washington State, all have confirmed this. The CDC has come out and said 3-foot distancing is acceptable for schools. California is implementing this distancing requirement. Lake Washington School District has confirmed their commitment to do everything possible to open up schools full-time come fall. Schools across the country have been open since September. Why is our district, after more than a year, still pulling together a plan? Every meeting we hear you are working on a plan. You as board members have a responsibility to look after what is best for students in NSD. Let me repeat. You as board members have a responsibility to look after what is best for students in NSD. You have not done that. You have let down the kids you are supposed to be protecting. Please, for the kids and because it is your responsibility to do what is best for kids, make it a priority to open schools up for students full-time. Thanks, Peter Otelli. And the last public comment is from Shannon Clark. The topic is mental health of older children. Dear NSD Board and Dr. Reed, when reading this out loud, please read with a voice inflection that honors the struggle many of us are facing. My family moved to NSD in early 2020 for the positive reputation of this district, and have been extremely disappointed with the lack of support for middle and high school students. I'd like to highlight findings that have been discovered this year nationwide. 1, virtual learning is not effective for younger elementary age, even with excellent teachers and hands-on parents. 2, virtual learning has caused a huge spike in mental illness and suicidal thoughts for middle and high school students. 3, incoming grades, kindergarten, 6th and 9th, are performing significantly lower academically with virtual learning. Once the CDC declared it safe, we assumed you would prioritize these findings and put an immediate plan in place to support all grade levels. You didn't. Then, frustrated with the 38 districts out of 295 who still did not include the upper levels, Inslee forced your hand. How embarrassing for our top-rated school district to be in the lower 38 at odds with our governor. We don't want to put anyone at risk, but some of our children need a safe in-person option to support their mental health. We just wanted our kids to be included and considered. In addition to Inslee's requirements, I'm asking you to consider the below. 1, 100% full-time options in the fall for all grades. 2, on-site open houses in the spring for the incoming grades, which now includes kindergarten, 1st, 6th, 7th, 9th, and 10th. Please give them something to look forward to, which helps with hopelessness and depression. 3, celebrate our resilient seniors with an in-person graduation ceremony they won't ever forget. Thank you, the Clarks.
All right, thank you for board members for reading. Thank you to those who have submitted public comment. We appreciate it. We will now move on to the adoption of the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second? All right, there's a motion, there's a second. Is there any discussion? All right, none being
Sorry.
seen or heard. Oh, sorry.
Hoping for a quick clarification. Resolution 29, just that will allow us to collect state matching funds to help pay for the concert hall at Inglemoor High School.
That's correct.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Any other questions? All right, hearing none. It's been motioned and there's been a second. I'll call for the vote. All right, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you. All right, we will now move on to performance reviews this evening. We're following up from a very good study session on goal number 1, success in the early years. So this is now our monitoring report for that goal. And Dr. Reed, if you'd please.
Sure. Thank you, President Swain. I think staff provided a really comprehensive report on our early years programs. And I think it's important to note that in some cases, these programs didn't even exist a few years ago. I should say in North Shore. I think our strategic plan goal 1, success in the early years, a lot of the work Director Doreen Milburn has done we've really increased the percentage of eligible preschool age children that are able to access developmentally appropriate preschool with supports. And we are now reaching over 70% of those eligible students, whereas previously we were in single digits several years ago. So just a tremendous amount of progress. I think to Director Cast's point around the iReady assessments, students will certainly have an opportunity to look at, to take those this spring at school. But, we remain encouraged by the work that students are engaged in to this point. So really, we didn't have a chance to dialogue much about the presentation because there was so much data to present. So just any questions you have or other data requests, I'd be happy to take some notes.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Any thoughts, questions?
Well, I'll jump in. Sorry, Director Cast. First of all, thank you, Dr. Reed, and your staff just did an amazing job trying to get through that humongous amount of data and assessments. It was a lot to digest. One question that I had with respect to preschool, pre-K, early learning to kindergarten, that I believe was addressed perhaps by Dr. Bigelow, but I think we've discussed this before as well. I wonder if there has been a correlation of some sort, if we know how many of our incoming kindergarten students have had some sort of preschool or early learning experience before they come in, and do we have that information as they're being assessed as they come in the door?
Well, my understanding, particularly for our students that we're serving, we have that information in Ready Start or Head Start or ECAP. And I think it's part of that conversation that kindergarten teachers have with their families as they come in. I don't know if Dr. Bigelow provided that detail this evening, but I can certainly get that data of, containing how many of our students do a formal preschool program.
No, that would be great. And it's not really relevant to our assessment for the purposes of the monitoring report, but I'm always a little curious about, if there's a correlation to how well the students are doing as they jump into formal school, is, whether they've had that preschool experience. And I will stop there and let other people ask questions.
And I'll hop in next. And again, too, I'd like to thank everyone for putting together such a thorough presentation. I know our earliest learners have been a topic of conversation for us this whole year. And so having such in-depth data, it was a lot to go through, but in a way, I think it's really important that we have all that data, because in a way, it's a benchmarking that we can continue to build on, right? Like it's so important to have that. There's a couple, I don't have questions. I'm kind of interested to hear what everyone thinks in terms of how we can take this data and use it the best way. So, I find it interesting. And when I was looking at, for example, the Washington Gold assessment, which is like the WA Kids, but for preschool, the social emotional numbers seem to have a little dip. And then when looking at the WA Kids information for kindergarten, because it was so, because there were so many variables going on, teachers couldn't completely observe. And so, that's really how we traditionally measure social emotional preparedness for our kindergartners, right? And so I'm just have a wondering going forward. Obviously, this is going to be really important, helping our students recover from the pandemic. At the middle school and high school, we have a grant. This is another acronym. I don't know the full thing, the SBIRT grant, the social behavioral, I don't know exactly what it stands for, but basically it's a screener to help us proactively identify students that are having social emotional issues. And a wondering I have is if we, in all our creativity and all the expertise we have with our educators of our youngest students, can think about at the elementary level, we have that tool at the middle and high school level. But I wonder if there's something we can think about for leveraging again to help our students recover from the crisis. Another wondering I have too, we talked briefly, as much as time would allow, around some of the iReady numbers taking some unanticipated jumps, let's just say, and what that might be caused by is somewhat, obviously we won't maybe never know, but the fact we notice it and we're tracking it, I think is actually the important point, which is why I did my quick. I know the last thing Director Hayes said, the last thing we want to think about when we're bringing our students back into school is sitting them in front of a computer to do another iReady test. But I think it's going to be really important so that we can, and it's not only the iReady results, but then the teacher calibrating what they're seeing, in conjunction with that, and what might be some outcomes that are tracked through report cards in conjunction with that iReady data. So we might be able to understand, where that spike came from. It might not be an aberration. There might be a practice that happens while we were teaching remote that maybe we could carry forward. It's just another wondering I have. And then I had one more wondering. I think, yeah, I guess, yeah, actually, that's kind of the one I wanted to end on, is how do we really, in a comprehensive way, help to understand what we need, as we discussed in our retreat at 2:00, we're actively advocating for resources to come to North Shore so we can build programs to help students recover. And so understanding what we need will help us know what we can as a team go advocate for. So again, I really appreciated the depth of the presentation. I think it's so critical right now. And I appreciate also too all the intentionality that was being put together by our educators in supporting our youngest learners during the crisis.
Thank you, Director Cast. I think to the SBIRT screener topic, one of the reasons that's so important at middle school is because teachers often see up to 150 students, right? Because they rotate between classes. And one of the benefits of being in elementary school is that one teacher has roughly 25 students-ish. So they really have a chance to get to know students well. So we have a lot of our referrals coming directly from teachers on that topic. So that's a little bit of a different scenario. And I know teachers are working closely with our principals, assistant principals, and elementary counselors to support the social emotional learning needs.
I'm going to follow Director Cass because I want to build on her wonderings. As we head into spring, while the SBAC is going to be administered, it will be less robust, shall we say, and we will not be getting data for every school at every grade level, which means we're going to have a second year of data that is going to have gaps in it. And so I'm wondering if maybe we as a board might want to meet in April, since we only have one board meeting then anyways, and have a several-hour conversation about what data we are looking for, both in terms of learning loss and to measure progress over the next year or two while we have this gap in one of the main ways that we've measured data in the past. So that's my big wondering. My second is, this is the second time for a goal study session presentation where we've run pretty dramatically short of time. So I'm wondering if in the future, maybe we can increase maybe by 30 minutes the amount of time allotted for goal presentations.
Dr. Reed, I was wondering if you could provide some clarification, maybe in a Friday brief, around the Walk Kids slides that we saw. One of the slides showed developing skills. There were 6 of them. And then there was another slide that showed kindergarten readiness. And I was just wondering if I could get some clarification on how the developing skills are used to determine kindergarten readiness.
You bet. I'll make sure, I'll ask Director Milburn to put those descriptors in the Friday brief for you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Actually, if I could just follow up on a couple of things, one from Director Kogan, and then I'll go back to Director Cast on one. I had a similar wondering about some of the data for kindergartners, and then following, kindergarten incoming, then for second, third grade, and there seemed to be a large high bar for the kindergartners that kind of was much lower, and I'm sure there's a logical explanation for that, with respect to how the kids are assessed or something. And I can send you the slide number to follow up. I'm just kind of curious about that particular one. And then I kind of wanted to float back to what Director Cast picked up on in discussion of iReady and some of the data and how we interpret the cases where there was a trend up or down, or sometimes a spike at the end. And I think this is going to be a process, and perhaps the students are going to be our best source of information about how they were dealing with not just learning, but also the testing from home. And perhaps with our youngest learners, like that we're discussing today, it might be a little more difficult to have that conversation. But I think as they transition back and our teachers transition back to interacting with them, I think we'll get a much better idea of not only how things perhaps might have been different for them learning and testing at home, but also how they're making that transition. If we see a decrease, is that because of the trauma of coming back and making that transition back to in-person, learning, or was it really something that was going on while they were at home? So just wondering some things to think about as we move forward, and depending on what we see with the kids as they get back in person.
Yeah, thanks, Director McGorty. And we also have to remember this is the second full year we've had iReady. And we did a pilot, a fairly restricted pilot 3 years ago. And then we did it a year ago, was our year of implementation. And then this year is our second year. One of the interesting things when I meet with our principals at our mid-year, and I do with all 35, beginning, mid, and end of the year, the amount of time students are spending with iReady is much greater than maybe it would have been had we been in school, right? So we're looking at a number of factors because students have devices at home that are loaded or are able to connect through Schoology to iReady. So just the amount of time some of our students have spent with that tool, because it's not exclusively an assessment. There are also certain lessons that students are working through. So I think there's a lot yet to unpack and learn about kind of what has worked and what hasn't. And I think each of you have been very clear that we want to try to figure out what those things are that, actually have had some benefit that we want to bring with us into back into the buildings. I know at one time we talked about one-to-one computers, and there was a real concern that elementary students weren't ready yet. And that was pre-pandemic. Right now we know that they're capable of doing quite a bit technologically, and then some. So I think there's some things we still have to unpack and learn, and we're looking forward to that. The data just is the data, right? It tells a story, but I don't want to read motive or things into it. It just is what it is. And I think the more we learn about it, the better. So I appreciate the questions.
Yeah. Just a quick follow-up. It might have cut off President Swain, but a quick follow-up. That's a very good point, Dr. Reed. And really, this is about understanding where our students are so we can help them continue to grow and in some cases recover from what's happened this past year. And so another question I have is last year, the end of 2020 in elementary, we had a grading system where you had pass or pass with support, correct, at elementary. Right. We're not doing pass with support this year. We're back to the traditional standards-based grading, correct?
That's correct.
It occurs to me though, having that pass with support last spring, I'm starting out, don't change the grading. That's not my point. The point is having that on the report card actually helped next year's teacher understand which students and in what area they were going to want to spend some extra time. So I'm wondering, the conversation that was had, that Dr. Bigelow specifically was talking about with the WA Kids assessment for our kindergartners, there were a good amount of kiddos who couldn't finish every domain in that. And so if there could be a similar way, this is just an idea, and someone else smarter than me might have already thought of it, using that actually as a similar kind of flag, right? For kids who perhaps might have had something else going on at home, maybe connectivity issues, they couldn't connect, which could indicate other things. It's just an idea I have, because really our idea is how do we do, the next stage of COVID, which is helping kids recover. And I'm just trying to brainstorm ways, like you said, the data is the data. But if there's any way we can still use it as a tool to support kids' growth next year, it would be great.
Yeah, and that's really what data should do, right? Inform our next steps. So absolutely.
Dr. Reed, you mentioned that we did the pilot for iReady a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Are we able to, or maybe we did it, but are we able to compare those kind of results with how those same kids done the SBAC to see if there's a correlation, or did they do better on the iReady on the same? I mean, that's kind of what we're getting at here. Is iReady a better assessment of learning or not, or maybe it's just different, but that would be interesting to go back and look at that if it's possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, President Swain. I do know that one of the reasons we selected iReady was so that we could have some type of formative assessment during the course of the year. So we didn't rely so heavily on just the SBAC at the end of the year, which was really summative. And a current teacher didn't necessarily get that data back in time to do much with it. So I know iReady, I don't think there's a perfect assessment out there, right? Our children aren't widgets, but I think it's a nice screener that gives folks an idea, are students progressing? Are they at least at grade level, which we consider a floor, not a ceiling? And so I don't know that we had a similar assessment previously. We used SBAC, I think, for reporting to the board. And this is something that gives us a beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of year kind of internal look.
Thank you. I don't have anything else to add. There's some great questions there, and the presentation was thorough. So thank you for all your work and all the work on behalf of the staff, and of course the teachers that actually implement all of this stuff in the end.
I did get a late breaking note from Dr. Malloy that says that the prepared with support comment that we do capture this kind of thing in the class placement process in the spring, where teachers traditionally fill out cards on strengths and challenges of students that go to the next year's teacher in the elementary realm.
Thank Thank you, Dr. Malloy.
Yeah, I know. I have a lot of lifelines, but yeah, and so it's not, I think it was more obvious last year when it was on the report card, but the same process will bear out because it's really important, I know, to our teachers to be able to walk alongside students and their families and continue moving forward.
Other questions for Dr. Reed? Okay. Well, thank you for all of that. We will now move on to, someone needs to make a motion. We have our three choices as we either find that the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the provisions of the relevant goal and the district is making reasonable progress towards achieving the desired results called for in the relevant policy. Secondly, based upon the information provided, the board finds that the superintendent has failed to provide evidence of reasonable organizational progress. And then third, the information provided by the superintendent is insufficient for the board to decide whether reasonable progress has been made. So is there a motion?
President Swain, I'll make a motion that Dr. Reed has reasonably interpreted goal 1 parameters and provided evidence that we're making progress.
Okay, motion's been
I'll
made to
second.
find, there's a second. Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Motion's been made to find the superintendent has reasonably interpreted the provisions of the policy and has been seconded. Is there a discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Anybody seen it pop up yet? Well, it's not just me. Well, okay, Siobhan says that it's popping up on her end, but not on ours. So we're going to do a voice vote to cover. And a little technical difficulty with the cloud, I assume. It's been motioned and seconded that we find that Dr. Reed is reasonably interpreted, etc. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any nays? Seeing none, motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to information items. The one information item we have this evening is a building condition assessment report, the BCA. Dr. Reed.
Thank you, President Swain. Siobhan, could you please share that screen? This is a report that happens annually and OSPI requires it. It's essentially an asset preservation form. And these are the different schools that we needed to require, or the OSPI required us to report on this year. And you can see Kokanee Elementary School, Bothell High School, Woodinville High School, Canyon Park. They still call it junior high, even though we call it a middle school, and Kenmore Junior High / middle school. North Creek High School, ironically, the main building as well, and Sorensen Early Childhood. So this is a report required, and it's an information item this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. Any questions? All right. Thank you. We'll move on to our next item is policy reviews. We will take a peek at goal number 1 as written. And Siobhan's got that pulled up. Great. Thank you, Siobhan. So, of course, is the policy that we just reviewed and were briefed upon. Any thoughts? Recommended changes, ponderings?
So I don't have thoughts on the goal itself. I know, again, kind of our practice is not to mess with a community written strategic goal. But I am really struggling with the presentation we just had in terms of the data and the amount of time we had to dig into it. I almost voted no, to be honest, because I do not feel like I had time to ask the questions, and the data that we received, there were so many gaps, and to really dig into what we would use to look at instead. So, and it's not anybody's fault that prepared it, and I'm not questioning the work that was done, or that that we haven't been focusing on it. What I'm concerned about was, one, we didn't have enough time to really hear from the people that presented it and to ask questions about the data. And two, because of the situation we're in, there were gaps in that data, and we didn't have the opportunity to discuss, so what does that mean and how are students doing? So I guess I'm issuing this as a warning. If this happens again with our next goal, I don't know that I'll be able to support it if we aren't given the time to really delve into it and have a conversation about the data that we're receiving, and what we're going to use instead if there are big gaps.
Thank you, Director Hayes. I had the same kind of thoughts on that, and I've kind of pushed for, since I got on the board, to have these study sessions to be a little, like, be at least 2 hours, because we tend to always run out of time to ask questions. And if they need to be, like, this one could have been done in 2 study sessions probably, but I know we have to plan around what kind of time we have. I would guess one suggestion is let's not have staff read us what's on a PowerPoint slide, because we can do that ahead of time if we're preparing. But to get to we can read it. Right? Let's jump to the significant issues that's within that slide. That would help, I think, shorten the presentation time and give us more time to ask questions. Because we want staff as a board, we want the experts, Dr. Reed and staff, to point out to us where some of the issues are and what some of the issues they're struggling with when they read the data, rather than having us try to kind of guess at it, I guess, or notice it ourselves. So that would be my thought. But I think just not only on this goal, but I think a 2-hour study session would be pertinent or appropriate. And if we end a little early, we get more than 4 minutes between the study session and the board meeting, which would be nice.
Well, for what it's worth, this is something I have struggled with too, but more in terms of, for myself, having what I feel is sufficient time to really thoroughly review the data before meeting with Dr. Reed and staff, to have intelligent questions to ask. I don't know how we can change or balance that with, giving the staff enough time to pull everything together, but enough time between we get it on a Friday and then we're meeting on a Monday as a rule, to have perhaps a bigger gap, time to digest it. But it's also made me wonder, for particularly for something like this, where there's so much content and so much that when we go into it, we don't understand, and that can generate more questions once we get some answers from staff, if it might not need, 2 sessions to thoroughly go through a goal, one where we have the presentation and major points made to us, and then some time to digest it and come back to more thoroughly go into detail about it. Just a thought.
That we can always, as a board, have that option, that it's more logistic to work around, but we work around it. If we feel we need more time to discuss a report, we could always table the vote for another meeting, right? I think it's a good reminder to us. We have a lot of work to do. Everyone in this district has a lot of work to do. But if it's at the point where someone would like to make a suggestion, that we table it so that we have the ability to reconvene and discuss it some more. I think, as we get into year 2.5 of monitoring reports, like, this is probably a good habit for us to adopt, not to be so afraid to alter the schedule.
Yeah, it might also help from guidance from Dr. Reed and staff before we adopt the schedule for next year. Maybe we really look at how much time each study, maybe each study session doesn't have to be exactly the same amount of allotted time. So next time we come up with goal 1, we're like, yeah, that one needs to be 2.5 hours, or, and some of them are very short and we don't need the full time, but maybe we look at it as each assignment, each parameter, each review, how much time do we need, rather than just kind of sticking to the same old schedule every year and then having to adopt it. But that might be something that would help us, and that would actually give staff. I felt bad for Obi when he said we have 60 slides, and and I knew we weren't going to get through them all. And but if they have 60 slides that are they find really important for us to know about, then let's maybe adjust the meeting length to accommodate. Anything else on the goal number 1?
Well, Director Hayes, I know that we have already voted as a body to pass this report, but do you feel it would be beneficial for us to have another discussion around goal 1, if just to answer the outline questions for that?
I think I just wanted to raise a concern that this was the second time I felt we had raced through it, but also just that concern around the data. This is only going to continue, where we're going to have presentations where there is going to be gaps and blanks. And again, it's not a wrongdoing or evil intent on anybody's part. It just is the situation. And if we as a board don't have a conversation of what then do we want to use as data to determine if students are making progress, then we're going to just keep having these presentations where there's asterisks.
Good point. Okay. Anything else? So Director Hayes, would you prefer to follow with Dr. Reed, and maybe if any of us have further questions about data issues or on this particular goal, or do you want to look at the schedule maybe offline and have an extended, discussion, or just another special meeting just to review the data? It doesn't have to be a policy review or a goal review.
Well, I kind of feel like maybe I'm the only one, because I'm not hearing, and so maybe it's just me, but what I had asked for earlier and I got no traction was an opportunity for us as a board to talk about, given that we have at least another year of no traditional data. What do we want in these goal reports to be looking at? And maybe it's just me. And if it's just me, I'll shut up and figure this out.
We do have a retreat scheduled in May, which we could bring that back to, because I think it would help provide guidance for staff too, right? Because I think it might be helpful if there's something else more specifically you're looking for, then we want to make sure we find it. So.
And you know, it's again, the downside of virtual worlds, like, you know, it's hard. We don't have the body language on the dais for us to be nodding vociferously all at the same time, right? I agree with you, Director Hayes. I think this is an issue. It's good to be thinking ahead. This is not just a spring of 2021 question. And so it's something I agree we need to talk about.
I'd like to add too, I feel that there are some gaps because of the circumstance, because of our inability to see all students, to get feedback from enough students, to have some of the measuring devices that we've done with standardized testing that we can compare year to year. So I do kind of think, you know, Director Hayes, to your point, there may be an asterisk on some of this data, and in future years, this will be kind of the year where there was just more error bars in the data. So I like what you're saying about, you know, what else might help us get to the heart of the question, which is how are these kids preparing kindergarten through third grade? But I've been wondering the same thing, is if in the future, are we going to look at these slides and, you know, 2020, 2021 is going to be just a weird, out of an alignment, you know, kind of data point.
I just thought I'd add too, I mean, as an analytical scientist and looking at the reams and reams of data that were presented today, but also realizing that, you know, much of these assessments are still new to the district, and then throw in the kink of trying to do it all during a pandemic and access the kids when, you know, this is how you access them. It's going to put a crimp in not only the amount of data, but the kind of data, as well as how well you can interpret the data. So yes, I think this year is a huge kink in what we'll be able to tell, but you know, we also need to expect that will be straightened out in the next year.
I'd like to build on that a little bit, Director McGordy, and say this is a very critical year, right? And so, you know, acknowledging that a tool at our disposal is broken is important, but we still need a tool, I think is what Director Hayes was trying to say. And especially this year, we need a tool to understand what we need for our kids and how we should use how we should roll out that. Forget it, my metaphor got lost. But right, like I think, and I think it's something it's a task we're up to, for sure.
I think we've also talked about standardized testing and their limitations, and we've talked about what else could we be using, because there are a lot of skills our students are learning that we're not measuring, and how do we capture that? So I think it's an opportunity, you know, our Mastery Transcript Consortium work, for example, although it doesn't fit with, you know, our earliest learners, but it is a type of assessment we haven't previously done, so we don't have comparables, but it might be a more holistic, thoughtful, authentic assessment that we might want to use moving forward. So I know I spent some time Sunday on the phone with folks about that. And again, that's an Innovation Lab high school topic, but it sort of fits in that topic of how might we look at assessment if we aren't restricted to the standardized test scores, which we're clearly not, because we don't have access to them either last year or this. So.
Yeah, one of the biggest shames, I think, is that the groundbreaking efforts that Dr. Reed and staff have made as far as testing all kids for high cap programs and to encourage them to stretch and be in more advanced classes. And I think that those kids probably would have performed better. We were expecting that anyway, to perform at higher levels, and we weren't, and then this came. So it kind of put a kink in it a little bit to see how that progression moves. It put us behind a little bit. So, but yeah, Director Hayes, I don't think you're alone. I mean, we're all kind of, scratching our heads. And I mean, there's so much data that came through the study session. I didn't even know what questions they answered, to tell you the truth, or questions to ask. But yeah, I think it'd be totally appropriate for us to sit at a retreat and talk about tools and how we approach next year, and our discussions that we've had about, hey, this is an opportunity for us to maybe suggest other ways of assessments to the state and to the federal government that are more appropriate. So I think Dr. Reed and I will work on that scheduling piece. Sounds like it's pretty uniform, that people would appreciate that. So I think we'll get through that and get back to you on the schedule. All right, any other parting thoughts, or would you like to move on? Good discussion, thank you. All right, we will now move on to our discussion of North Shore reopening plans and progress, and all things that are happening under our current system. So Dr. Reed, would you like to lead us?
Sure. Thanks, President Swain. Wanted to mention again that our Bridge Weeks, we have 2 Bridge Weeks back to the classroom for elementary, and those did start this morning. And those will go through this week and next. And then on April 5th, all kindergarten through 5th grade students will return who choose to in the hybrid model. And that model's on the website and outlined, I think, in pretty significant detail. Individual schools are currently working on how to assign staff based on student returning numbers and staff numbers. So that work's happening at a school by school level. As our schools are different sizes, they have really different percentages of students choosing to return. So those principals and teachers are going to be connecting and continuing to connect with families about the specifics and logistics of the elementary plan. I want to also share that we've worked together to craft a secondary plan for our grades 6 through 12 students who choose to return. And we, late Saturday, and then I think also today, both the district and the association have conceptually reached a tentative agreement, and we're working to finalize contract language. That went on all day today. Tomorrow, both the NSEA Rep Council and Executive Board will meet to vote to ratify the agreement. Once that's done, we'll be able to make this information available on Wednesday, along with sending out our final survey for grades 6 through 12 students, their families, and staff. So that work should be completed tomorrow evening, and more details to come, and the website will be updated on Wednesday. And that's for grades 6 through 12 and their return on April 19th to some form of hybrid. And once that vote is taken tomorrow evening, we'll be releasing information Wednesday about that model. So a lot happening. And once we get our secondary students who choose to return back on campus, and then we'll pivot to planning for fall. We look forward to hearing information as it comes from OSPI, the Department of Health, and the Governor's Office on details for fall planning. And we understand we'll receive those in April. So that should be good timing for us. We'll be able to take the recommendations and work through April and May and have a recommendation for fall before we leave for summer this year.
All right, thank you, Dr. Reed. Questions?
I have
two questions, Dr. Reed. The first one, since teams were working all weekend, you would have been working after hearing the CDC news about the 3 feet distancing. And so I'm wondering, how'd that go? I mean, as you're in the middle of planning, specifically secondary this weekend, what were the discussions around that news? And we haven't heard anything from the state yet, which is really who's doing the check boxes with our plan. But I'm just wondering how that 3 feet conversation played into the planning.
Well, we actually started the plan, as you know, before we heard about the 3 feet. So we certainly discussed the possibility of that shift, but it hasn't been shifted yet at our state level. So we proceeded with planning for 6 feet because that's what the current guidelines in Washington State are. And we need a plan, and we need to communicate the plan because we have students returning now at elementary and on April 19th for secondary. Having said that, we also recognize that even a hybrid plan at secondary, middle, and high school with 3 feet, there's still some restrictions around cafeterias that we have to remain 6 feet, even with the CDC guidance. And so there's some pieces of that we recognize. Even bringing secondary students back in a hybrid, there are going to be times in the halls where 3 feet was sort of what we were planning anyhow, to be honest. It's just that in terms of the classroom spaces, I think the elementary, it's possible in places, because one of the things that research has said is with 6 feet, you get about 50% of our kids back, and with 3 feet, about 75%. And what we know is that in some buildings at elementary, it might be possible to get more students back more days, but in other buildings not. Because we have such crowded elementary schools. So I think that right now we've planned the best hybrid we could with the 6 feet rules. And if it was 3 feet, I don't know that it would impact the secondary at all. It might at elementary, but at this point, we have the plan to move forward. And I think what's very likely is that that's going to be the 3 feet, 6 feet, or maybe even different numbers of feet by the time we get to spring is going to be the determinant for the fall schedule for sure. So I think we're still waiting. And at this point, we planned with the information we have. Because you're correct. I know that Washington State still has to make a decision on when that becomes our guideline. But I don't know that it'll impact, like I said, secondary, if at all, and then elementary is a question mark as well. What is more students, but not all students, and so we're just trying to make sense of that.
Right. If it doesn't help every elementary school building, that's really difficult.
Well, and we need really one model, right? We can't have one school and one model and one another. So I think one of the things we would want to do, if the state then shifts from 6 feet to 3 feet, at that point, we would want to come back and renegotiate that conversation with our association again, because, a lot of the data, recommendations, and guidelines continue to shift and move. And we would want to bargain the impact of that.
That makes sense.
The wondering I have is, at the elementary level, depending on the percent of students that want to remain remote, the 3 foot, 6 foot may not make a difference in a school building if there isn't a demand to put more students into the classroom. So I don't know, that may be an individual school ratio that changes, but perhaps it wouldn't make that big of a difference in some places.
Well, and that's what we're finding, Director Kogan, that depending on the numbers of students returning or choosing to, it may or may not make a difference school to school. And we still need a system-wide model that, is something we roll out across the entire district, all 21 elementary schools. But I have our facilities folks are remeasuring and rechecking, and also looking at how the CDC recommendations affect transportation as well, in terms of numbers of students we can put on a bus. And all of those pieces are data points we're reevaluating. Should we receive guidance that changes again?
And I had just one more question, which is something I kind of just dropped in. Of course, a lot has been going on, but having a data dashboard to track if there's any cases that pop up in school buildings, is that something that the team has had an opportunity to look into doing?
We do keep a data dashboard internally facing so that when staff or students or student athletes test positive, that we have that data. I think it's going to be important once we have students back on campus to construct an external facing document with data. And I think we can review with you sort of some of the ideas that we currently have. We don't want to call out individuals publicly. So we want to be really thoughtful about that. But I think that our community, would want to know about cases and that type of thing. We want to make sure everyone's safe and that when we return, we can keep school open.
Exactly. And I think people are going to want to understand just by their building over a certain amount of time, how it's going.
You bet.
So I absolutely, we don't have to construct it in a way that would give away any private information at all. And that was my question. Thank you.
You bet. And I know I was talking to our bus drivers this morning and, really grateful that they're out driving and, of course, bringing kids to Bridge Week right now. And, of course, they raised, in a couple of the conversations, raised the topic of the Spokane School District bus drivers and the situation they had and just how important it is for us to stay on top of any cases so that we can quickly quarantine and contact trace so that we don't have an outbreak similar to what happened there. So,
Dr. Reed, just following up on that topic, could you clarify, as we had one public comment that asked, and there's still a little confusion about how we're testing and whether the Gates Foundation is still involved. And I know we've had to change providers, but could you clarify where we're at now with our testing going, what we're doing now with athletics and then testing going forward?
Sure. Thanks, President Swain. The Gates Foundation, I think, was really a convener. The original testing pilot involved the Department of Health, and the funds came from the Department of Health. The Gates Foundation was a convener or connector for the Department of Health and school districts that were interested in testing. And I'm trying to remember, Curative, I think, was the name of the company that was doing PCR tests, and Binax was doing rapid antigen testing. So we were using State Department of Health monies and connecting districts, and the Gates Foundation, I think, was creating some type of a technological app or some way to have that information be easier to access. But there is no influence from the Gates Foundation, and we don't turn any data over to them. It's actually with the Department of Health. And what we actually found with our student athletes that we're doing batch testing with is that we prefer to use actually a local lab in Bellingham as compared to sending test samples back east. We had some really mixed results with actually getting those tests to them in time or having to repeat testing. So right now we're looking at a more local lab, although Curative, it's my understanding now, or Ginkgo, I don't know all the lab names, but I think it's Ginkgo now has a Seattle lab. But the testing protocol is important for us to nail down. I know the president has released a significant amount of money to states for school testing around COVID. And I know that's something that's an interest for us to really think about as part of our safe return and staying open. So I know all of our states are taking a look at that.
And if I could add, I'm sorry, President Swain, really quick follow-up. So
go ahead.
That Gates app, we never ran with, right? I don't remember hearing anything about that.
Yeah, I don't know that it ever has been completed, to be honest, but no, we're not using, to my knowledge. I think they're still working on it, but I will check with Alan Miedema. I know he's attended several meetings where they've discussed it, so I can get some information, but I have not heard that we've moved forward with that. That's correct.
Because yeah, privacy information around that app would be a really important question for sure.
Well, I think that's where it's got installed. Yeah.
And then, you've discussed in a meeting and we got some information on our Friday brief about Children's Hospital rolling out some testing too, correct?
Right. We signed a partnership agreement with Children's Hospital for rapid antigen testing. And there are a number of districts. I know Auburn also is working with Children's Hospital. It's just another partner because they also have the tests and the resources. So, it's important for us to think about if we're going to use those tests. And those rapid antigen tests really they provide results within 20 minutes if someone is symptomatic on site. And that's an important tool to have, which is different than batch testing for asymptomatic monitoring. But this is something that within a very short time, we would know if someone had COVID who was having COVID-like symptoms on campus, so that again, we could, call parents or provide an immediate isolation so that we can keep schools open, right? And attend to the health concerns of those that need support.
I had a question unrelated to COVID testing, if we're done with that conversation. So I had a wondering, I'm recognizing that we have a number of students that will be coming back into our buildings that basically over the past year have become adults. They've been working to pay rent, to provide food for family, they've been caring for siblings, and we're going to put them back into classrooms where they'll be treated as children, right? They're going to have to ask to go to the bathroom, ask to be able to talk. And so what kind of thought process are we having around those students? And then just a bigger wondering in terms of our behavior modification practices, a lot of them involve removing the student from the classroom. And certainly as students have mental health, trauma, that coincides with maybe not behaviors that we envision in our classrooms. And so how are we proactively working to make sure that kids are able to stay in classrooms and be engaged and thoughtfully learning?
Well, I think that you're correct. I think we do need to recognize that students are returning to school with new skills and new mindsets in some cases. I will say the kindergartners this morning, often that first day of school is a little tearful and a little clingy sometimes for parents. Not this morning. We had students bounding out of cars and I think ready to go. So we, of course, are reviewing trauma-informed practices with staff and revisiting the training we did in August around that very topic. And I think it's just coming together and relearning some of those social skills as adults and also with our students. So it's just, it'll be a learning process, but I think that we're gonna have to be patient. Many of our students have experienced things. Some students have lost family members and had impacts from the pandemic that have been serious and continuing, right, with family members or friends and that type of thing. So we want to be sensitive to that and make sure we're using really thoughtful trauma-informed practices. We're grateful that we have the extra counseling staff at elementary and middle and high school as we've increased our ratios at middle school, and the mental health staff and our partnership with, as you know, Evergreen Health and Forefront with the University of Washington. So more to come. We haven't emerged from a pandemic before. At least there's not a lot of recorded history of the reemergence in 1918. I think I've heard from several of you about that. So, we'll have to, I'm guessing, monitor and adjust. So as we move forward.
got to be another question out there. Dr. Reed, I'll throw one out. So elementary, we're marching forward with our plan, which is posted on our website, which is a hybrid model of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, all day splits. When I look at our neighboring districts and others around the state, at least, it seems that rough numbers, from what I've looked at, roughly half of the school districts that are similar in size are doing that model. Some are doing half days, morning, afternoon, on 4 days, some on 5 days. Some are doing 2.5 hours only in a morning. So I know you've looked through all of this, and we've all studied what we can and what we can do and what we thought was more appropriate for classroom time. But sorry to have you rehash, but could you re-explain a little bit about how we got to that point? And then maybe from that, I know the MOU is still being negotiated, but is there any color you can shed on what high school it will not look like or may look like within reason?
Yeah, so let me start with the idea of the mornings and afternoons, because really I think we kind of began initially to look at, could we bring students back in a hybrid that had everybody back or half the people in the morning and half in the afternoon, and kind of flip the day. Our transportation system cannot turn around those routes for the entire district quickly enough to do that. So that was a non-starter. Because I think that was one of our preferred ideas early on. We're just not able to do that with the geographic layout and the bus, all of how that works, right? So if we're going to do hybrid, it wasn't going to be a morning afternoon. So the other option is 2 days in and 2 days out. And when we looked around our region, that's really generally what many folks have done. And like with elementary, it is a full day, so we turn the buses around to support that. The secondary model, and I will say in districts around us, one of the reasons we really took a long, hard look at the hybrid is the significant number of disruptions for teacher assignments. And a number of the Puget Sound region, were between 35 and 40% of teacher assignments changed. And that's a significant disruption for the last 8 weeks of school. But it's a fact. I mean, we're not going to numerically, statistically always have the right number of kids want to come back to match the right number of staff, right? Like we're going to have to make adjustments, and each school is in the middle of doing that right now. Some will be cleaner than others just based on how the numbers fall. Having said that, the secondary, it's even, in many ways, it's even more important for the same teacher. I don't know, more important, but it's certainly as important, because many of the high school courses, actually all of the high school courses, are credit-bearing courses and connected graduation. So we have really narrow endorsements and certifications for high school staff that are not quite as specific at elementary. In other words, I know one of the high schools came back with 120 singleton courses that had to be taught by one person, because there was only one person that could do that particular course. Whereas it's different. We might have 120 third grade teachers. We don't have 120 AP Physics C teachers. So we had to figure out a way. So what you'll see, I think, in the high school and middle school models is our work to try to keep those really specialized endorsements somewhat true in that model. So we also know that for students to earn credit, we can't just remove them from classes and credit-bearing courses, because again, with 8 weeks left, you can't have like these hanging 0.25 credits for courses if you mix endorsements for teachers, because the certification is pretty specific. So I don't want to go into more details than that until after the agreement is ratified tomorrow evening. But Wednesday, we will have details, and actually building schedules will be available for our middle and high school students. We also know that trying to minimize transition time and make sure we have support and enrichment time in a schedule were very important keys to us as we thought about things. You know, the secondary is just a very different way to schedule, to be honest. And we had to work with that.
Gotcha. If I could just real quick, and then I'll let others speak. I think it's important to point out, if you could explain a little bit on the transportation piece, because we do get email from people saying that most parents will drive their kids to school, and therefore transportation should not be an issue. But as we know, we're legally bound to send buses out, even if there's one kid sitting on a corner, right? And we know that there are families that don't have cars, and that or the parents are working full time. They have to have the bus pick them up. So it's not that we can't use buses, but if you could maybe expand a little bit on the legal requirement of providing transportation, even if it's 3 kids on a bus, that'd be helpful.
Well, technically, the requirement to provide transportation, I think, exists for students in special programs and access. But I think if you provide transportation to anyone, we're required to provide it for everyone, right? Within the non-school zones, I think there's a walk zone. Or we could provide no transportation to anyone, but I think North Shore's tradition has been to provide transportation where students and families need it. So we have to run routes to students, and in our case, to students who request that. I think we have fewer kids on the bus this morning, for example, than we might traditionally. I think we'll continue to probably build those bus loads. Some schools have a lot of students that ride buses, and some schools have fewer. It also depends on where the school is, right? Some schools, there are a lot more walkers and a lot of bikers, but other schools, not so much. So it's really a mixed bag when you think about 21 elementaries, for sure.
Thanks for clarifying that, because I know I get confused on what's required and what's not. And
well, and then there's the Head Start and ECAP, like the early childhood programs come during the middle of the day where they're going and coming, and those are all going to 3 centralized schools from all over the district. And then you add in the 6 middle schools and their intersecting times, and the 4 comprehensive high schools, Innovation Lab and SAS. And you start to build, it's like a Jenga puzzle with elementary, middle, and high. And what we realized is the high school often drives it. And I don't think we're going to love all parts of some of the restrictions that transportation has, but it is what it is. And yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Other questions? Requests? I'll do one last one. How about band? What are we doing with band in middle and high school? It's been a topic of recent discussion and previous discussion. So I'll let you clarify, have an opportunity to clarify.
No, we did receive some notes on marching band in particular at high school. And yes, we've confirmed there's a marching band season. I'm not sure. I think sometimes information gets out, maybe that's not accurate, or maybe the communication somehow, I don't know where it comes from sometimes, but I met with our music staff last week on a number of topics. And my understanding is that Charlie Fix, I know, who's at Inglemore, has collected the PPE orders that are unique to instruments in band. And they're working with David Wellington. And if it's not already been ordered, those items, I think they added middle school as well to make sure that we had band PPE ordered that's separate. So I know that's all in the works. And our music folks are excited and our kids are excited. And I think we all look forward to seeing marching band in its season, and music classes in general. I know WIAA and the State Department of Health have unique performing arts guidelines, both for also drama and music programs. So we'll follow those, but they're, as you know, important here in North Shore and core to our work. So we want to make sure those come off the page well.
And I have one remaining question, Dr. Reed. In-person graduation. With the governor's latest announcement, we can go from 200 people in an outdoor event to 400 people, which is great news. So I know there's a team focusing on seniors. So how's that going?
Well, we just received the updated senior guidance today for graduation. And as part of that guidance, and I've only had a chance to read it once because we got it at about, I don't know, 4 o'clock and we were in a meeting already, our board retreat. But I do know that it raised the number. It also, I believe, indicated that the participants don't necessarily count the actual graduates if it's outdoors. But again, I need to probably reread that. It did indicate we had to make sure we seated graduates 6 feet apart. And even as they processed in or out, to have staggered start times, perhaps. But the 6-foot rule was prominently in the graduation guidance, which came out today. So it does give us hope, I think, that, and then there was something about outdoor venues from the governor's work that we have to sort of lay over that, like issue spectator numbers, I think, in groups of 8, and then keep those groups of 8 6 feet apart. So the long and the short of it is, it looks like we're going to be able to do some type of outdoor graduation in person. And I think that committee will look at the guidance. And then there was another note that said there might be updated guidance April 15th. So we'll just keep hoping that the guidance will continue to support, an in-person graduation. I know the committee was looking at maybe having to do shifts if there was a limited number. But I'll be curious to see what they come up with. I know they're quite creative, and I'll keep you updated as we know. I know they're also, each of our high schools are doing a senior event prior to spring break. And I shared that report with you from Assistant Superintendent Heather Miller. Again, all 4 schools have kind of created different events that are unique to their school community, and they've been creative and thoughtful, and I think really mindful of health and safety guidelines, and still have put together events that I think will be a lot of fun for our seniors.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, ready to move on to our next section. All right. Thank you, Dr. Reed. Our next section here, we've added, well, it's our usual board reports and communications, but before we do board reports, we have a topic here to discuss in-person board meeting planning. We've been, chatting a little bit about this as people get vaccinated and as the guidance changes from the state. How are we all feeling about whether we continue virtual or we do a hybrid board meeting, or do we all go back to the boardroom? So this is kind of an open discussion of I like to hear people's personal opinions on what personally they feel, and then, other organizational thoughts about it. So I'll just open it up to the floor.
So I think President Swain, the board chair does have a lot of, according to our protocols, like not quite latitude, right? But in terms of taking care of like some of the logistics, definitely, I don't think we need to burden you with planning like all the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
But we have a month until our next board meeting, because we don't traditionally do a board meeting during spring break. And so I personally would like to see if we could be in person before the end of the school year. That's just me. And I was looking, because Issaquah is part of our Friday East King County collaboration call. They've started what they call a hybrid. So what they do is they have figured out the spacing in their boardroom, and they ask community members who want to come give public comment to pre-register. So you have to email in and put your name down so that they keep a room count in case they hit room capacity. So I think by 2 p.m. or something, you need to pre-register to come. And they've done that. And then Lake Washington was saying what they do is they have a couple board members call in. So they don't even all go into the meeting. I think they have 2 board members Zoom in basically, or 1 board member Zoomed in. I think Sarah zoomed in. So I think there's a couple different ways we could do it. But I know, even just earlier today, Director Hayes, when you were talking about, how can we, do we have board support for looking at measures? Like, it's just hard to interact here, without the body language and all. I personally, I feel there's a lot of advantages. And another thought is to maybe it doesn't have to be every board meeting. There's no rule in the OPMA. If we have a long board retreat, that would be better virtually, right? As long as we pre-publish, or maybe we save the in-person option for doing a school visit, right? Where it's so critical to be in person. So just some thoughts.
Thank you, Director Cast. Anyone else, general thoughts?
Sure, President Sweeney, I'll add some general thoughts. I think if we have the option to come back to the boardroom for board meetings, if we can maintain maybe a 6-foot distance and wear masks, then I feel I'd be comfortable with that. I think there are some guidelines about number of people and occupancy in the phase that we're in. So to Director Cast's point, what they're doing in other groups of maybe registering public comments so we get a sense of the number, that would be reasonable. And then I also agree, I think that doing like study sessions and kind of board retreats on some topics are working well with Zoom and virtually. And maybe for other topics, it might be nice to have that in-person meeting. So I think I'm open to any kind of suggestion along all those lines. Thank you.
Yeah. Director McGrady, you had your hand up.
Yes, well, I agree with much of that. One thing that I've thought about a lot with respect to coming back in person, say now, I would so love to see all of you and be able to, even just fist bump or something. But if we come back to a situation where we need to be wearing a mask while we're having this meeting, it seems to me it would kind of defeat the purpose of being there in person for our public if they're not really seeing our faces and seeing us discuss as we do here. But having said that, if our next meeting is a month away, I think many of us will be vaccinated by that point, and certainly in theory by May 1st, or was it May 31st? I think many of us will be vaccinated, and if we have the precautions set up in the boardroom, perhaps at that point it would be feasible to be there without a mask. I'm not sure. And now, that's my reaction too. I'm just thinking about when we're speaking, in public, it seems to be sort of a barrier.
Just clarification. I think the governor's guidance was we have to still wear masks.
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Which is the thing that makes me hesitate about being in person as opposed to this. But if we, sort of go back and forth or do some sort of a hybrid situation that could alleviate some of that barrier, perhaps.
Yeah, I didn't think about the Yeah, when you go, because I think we've all been watching other boards, how they do it, like Issaquah, and I've watched like Washington. It's kind of a hybrid where some people call and Zoom in and some people are in the room. But yeah, when you're in the room, you have a mask on, you really can't see people's facial expressions when they're speaking. So even though we're in the room, your face is covered up. It's kind of a different context or a feel too. But yeah, I'm totally open. I mean, we're going to eventually get back. I like the idea. I mean, one of the hesitancies of going back was for a lot of different reasons, is having too many people in the public and in a large gathering in the boardroom, worrying about public safety. We have staff that we didn't want to have in like a study session to be in a study session for an hour and a half in a room, of course. So all those considerations, but I think by the time we get back to it after spring break, most people will be vaccinated. Not most people, but a lot of us will be, a lot of staff will be. But yeah, I think I'm totally open to going back, but then also having the option for people that if they prefer to Zoom in, then we can do kind of a hybrid layout too. It seemed to work pretty well. At like Washington, they had their members zooming in. They had them up on the big screen behind the dais, so the audience online and in the room could see the person and hear the person speaking. So it seemed to work fairly well. Any other thoughts on that? I think this will be a ongoing discussion, and we'll have to work with communication staff and Dr. Reed about how the best way to approach it. But thanks for all your comments on that and your thoughts. If you have others, please let me know, and we'll plan ahead. Okay, we did that. Board reports, communications. Well, board reports will be last. So any new business, actually? None from the audience. I have one item that I'd like us to think about, and it's just a thought about the conversations with the board. But our next conversations with the board is like first week of next month. And I don't know how we did this. Usually we don't have them 4 weeks apart. Usually they're like 3 months apart. But I'm thinking, I think in some ways it might be good to push it from April into May, because we'll have secondary back in classes. Some of our high school events will be up and running socially. There'll just be a lot more going on in the district with kids in school buildings, and I'm really interested to hear from parents about how that's going and how it's not going. Then we can start getting into feedback on supports for summer, supports for fall, where kids are at. It just seems that if we go back into it in the next couple of weeks already, since it was so close to the first one, we won't have, I just would love to have more material to talk about, especially when kids are in classrooms, and secondary will be back for a little bit. So I'm thinking like second week of May or mid-May. I don't know. I wanted to throw that out to you, see how you felt about it.
President Swain, I agree. I think that there would be the potential for lots of different topics to be discussed once there's more students back into a new routine. So I think that would be valuable to push it a month.
Thank you, Director Kogan.
Another advantage might be, depending when in May, obviously we'll have to talk to communications and see what dates available. May starts to get busy with end of year, even if they're virtual or hybrid end of year things. So seeing what's available, but if it's about mid-May, we might have some of that updated guidance from the Department of Health about what next year will look like. And so that would be a really meaningful conversation. I have to be honest, virtual conversations with the board is tricky for me. I like sitting in a library in a circle with people. like it's hard, you just can't do the same thing virtually. But that doesn't mean I also, though, like the fact I like the fact we've kept some sort of town hall format through this. And so even if it's imperfect, making sure if pushing it out a couple of weeks makes it more meaningful and we can actually have, if 200 to 300 people are showing up, and we still have to do our, oh my gosh, I thought of it. It was like a game show, like where, you get handed questions and you have to answer to the black box. But it's much more meaningful than going April 5th, when we have so many questions still about not only, what to do for the summer, but what to do for next year as well as, maybe we'll have graduation plans by then, right? Like all this great information that we're waiting on. So I guess I'm agreeing with Director Kogan in summary.
Thank you. Dr. Hayes, Dr. McGurty. Dr. McGurty,
Yeah,
you're up.
Yes, thank you, President Swain. I think I agree with it being a little more beneficial to wait instead of having it. Would that be next week or the following week, for the reasons stated? But since you brought it up, it reminded me too that one of the things I've been wondering about is how we can sort of make that a hybrid experience as well. It's been such a one of the positive things about all of this is that the virtual world allows many more people to participate in things like this, because they don't have to travel. And in particular, in a situation like this, there may still be people who do not want to come in person, that if we can make it a hybrid so that, people who want to, be in a room or not can choose to do so. But if we can find a way to also let people call in, or be in some kind of a Zoom link, or to maintain that increased accessibility, I think that would be good.
Good idea. Thank you. Dr. Hayes, any comments on it at this point? I just want to mull it over.
My only thought was that mid-May the weather might be plausible for doing it outside.
Yeah.
I like that.
Could plan it around a 70-degree day, maybe.
That is a great idea, Director Hayes.
Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Yeah, just not freezing cold and raining. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, that would be nice.
An umbrella at the same time, I think would be.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's good feedback. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's just, we're just gonna have so much more to talk about and to get feedback from parents on. And I didn't even think about, we're gonna have guidance from DOH and the governor's office about fall and where we need, what that's gonna be looking like and everything else. So, all right, well.
I would say with 6 more days, the guidance is going to change easily 8 times. That seems to be so.
It's possible. All right. Well, Dr. Reed and I will look at the calendar and think about where that might work in the month of May and what's appropriate, and get back to you on that. Dr. Reed, do you have a comment on it or thoughts?
I'm open to whatever the board wishes on this. So it is helpful. I think we should have some more answers for fall as soon as we can button up our spring planning. And I know we've worked really hard to be done with that and can make some announcements Wednesday. Then I think we can pivot to, well, not pivot quickly because we still have to enact the plans that we've written.
Yeah.
And it's the same people enacting the plans that are making the plans. So but we definitely want to get moving in April on our best thinking for fall.
Just if you don't mind on that topic of fall, Dr. Reed, if you want to clarify it one more time, I mean, it is our intention as a school district and a board that, and our hope that fall is like normal school year where everybody gets to go back to school and we have all this behind us. Of course, that is our plan. That is our intention. Parents shouldn't think otherwise, but we also we have to be guided, right? We have DOH, we have CDC, we have everything else to tell us in what the pandemic looks like in the fall.
Right.
Is that a fair way to say it?
I think so. I think that's a fair way to say it. I think that I think we're all hopeful that we can start school more traditionally this fall for sure.
Thank you.
I think what we don't want to do is overpromise and underdeliver. But we certainly have the goal of getting kids back and starting a school year in a traditional manner. That's definitely, I think everyone would appreciate that. Staff, students, families, board, superintendent. I think if we never have another conversation about COVID guidelines, we would all be fine with that.
Yes, for sure. All right, thank you. Board member reports. Director Kogan is first.
Thank you, President Swain. March 10th, I was able to watch the state of our schools virtually, and I want to commend the Dr. Reed and the communications department for doing such a great job with that presentation. March 15th, Director Cast and I had a conversation with Senator Stanford and a conversation about some of the things happening in our district, as well as the work that's happening in Olympia. It was very helpful, and we appreciate his time and support of our students in the district. Also that evening, attended the North Shore PTSA Council meeting. Just a quick update on the happenings at the meeting. New officers were elected, and I want to congratulate Jane Kyoto for serving as the council president for this next year. She's the acting president right now and is doing a fabulous job. And then I also wanted to mention that Dr. Reed joined the PTSA meeting and did a period of question and answers that was really informative and helpful for the PTA leaders in our district. I just want to thank all the folks that volunteers their time and efforts in the PTSA. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kogan. Director Hayes.
Thank you, President Swain. First of all, I have to apologize. I had a light bulb burnout right at the beginning of the meeting, so I have not had a chance to address the fact that I am sitting in the dark. But yes, so I have had multiple meetings, 3 statewide meetings with school board members from around Washington State and 1 regional one. Over the last 2 weeks, I also attended the State of the Schools. So again, thank you to everyone. That the kids were fantastic. I could listen to the music performances all day. They were delightful. And then similar to Director Kogan, I've had several meetings with one with Senator Brock, one with Senator Dingra, and Representative Doer, Representative Goodman, and Representative Santos all last week. Again, bringing that concern that was raised earlier in our board retreat around ESSER funding and the inequity for our district compared to others. And then on March 17th, we had our career day. I have spent the last 6 months working with a number of the people, including members of our PTAs and our schools foundation. We had over 4,500 of our middle school students that registered for that. We're still getting the data, but we believe that most of them were able to attend and participate, and some great positive reviews of that experience. It was all virtual. All 6 of our middle schools were able to participate. So that was a first for both of those this year. Some technology learnings for the adults working the system, but it was a great event, and really so grateful to all the people that just really put in tons and tons of hours to make that happen for our kids.
Thank you, Director Hayes. Director McGrudy.
Okay, thank you, President Swain. And Director Hayes, for what it's worth, I'm usually sitting in the dark. Okay, on Tuesday, March 9th, I attended the large school district caucus, which was a WASDA event. Also on March 9th, I attended the Fernwood school visit. Came away just so impressed to their wonderful approach to the whole child. So that just well done. Wednesday, March 10th, I also watched the State of Our Schools presentation and just was sobbing at the presentations by our musical kids. Also on March 10th, I have been attending the Snohomish County Council sessions, one of which is the legislative session on Wednesdays. Really nothing of import over the last week or two. Thursday, March 11th and 18th, attended the WASDA networking calls. And then on Monday, March 15th and Wednesday, March 17th, I joined Director Cast to meet with Representative Kloba and Representative Springer, respectively, for the meetings on the Hill, provide input on our education priorities. And as Director Cast will tell you, it's much like speed dating, trying to get things in our short little 15-minute window. So that's me.
Thank you, Director McGurty. Director Cass.
Thanks, President Swain. Yeah, to tag on what Director McGurty was saying, virtual version of WASDA's lobbying platform, instead of running around in one day, you have a week of virtual meetings, but they're still only 15 minutes long. And so it does, and you're attending with board directors from other neighboring districts who are in the same legislative district. And so it is, you try to get your points in very quickly. But what we worked on in some collaboration meetings with our neighboring districts, we focused on student well-being and we focused on financial stability. And for the various districts, that can be slightly different, but student well-being a lot on social emotional supports, financial support for mental health counselors. We are not alone in being a district that has a patchwork of grants and programs to do that very important work, which we know is really important. And also to have conversations about how the implementation of the federal COVID relief money for schools ended up being implemented in a very, may I say, cattywampus way, with North Shore School District getting 1/10 of per pupil funding than other districts. So we're trying to raise the red flag about that really quickly, which we talked about as a board in the retreat. So in terms of the actual schedule, March 9th, I was privileged to be along for the Fernwood school visit. Thank you to Principal Bradshaw and Assistant Principal Redshaw. It was a great visit, so appreciated it. March 10th, I also got to view the state of the schools. It was a lovely presentation. I had to send a picture of the accordion and piano duet to my boys who have always craved an accordion, I have to be honest. March 10th, also, I watched the first legislative district, which North Shore is part of, their town hall, and I was somewhat thrilled to hear only one education question in the whole thing. So not much to report from that. March 11th, attended the WASDA weekly COVID topics call. March 12th, attended the East King County School Board collaboration call with staff members from Congresswoman Del Benny and Senator Cantwell. March 15th, that's when WASDA Week on the Hill kicked off. So on March 15th, had meetings with Senator Frocht, Representative Kloba, Representative Dewar, and Senator Stanford. On March 16th, it was Representative Goodman. On March 17th, it was Representative Springer and Senator Dingra. And then on March 18th, the WASDA weekly call again, and then finally wrapped up with a visit with Representative Valdez. And then March 19th, this past Friday, the East King County group again, and this time with representatives from Senator Murray, her education aide, as well as representatives from Congressman Smith and Congresswoman Schreier, since they represent the areas of our collaborating East King County School Board. So thank you to all my partners here on the North Shore School Board that accompanied me on all the 15-minute crazy meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cass. For me, I'll keep it short. It's on the Friday call with the East King County folks with Director Cass and some very knowledgeable staff people at Senator Murray's office and Senator Del Benny's, Representative Del Benny's office. And was peeked in on the WASDA call for a little bit. And then state of our schools was a pleasure to participate in, and it was just really well done. So congrats to and thank you to Dr. Reed and Lisa and the communications staff, and just does such a great job in putting it all together. That is all I have. And that brings us to adjournment. It says here on the bottom of my piece of paper. So I will call this meeting adjourned and we'll see you next time. Thank you.